Let's talk about the part 4 of this lesson, making the presentation incredible for that first impression, for your sales efforts, and most important, from the yes vote for the city council and the planning commission, assuming that your site is your proposal is going to be better than others because you've gone through these lessons. As a consultant, you are being judged on your deliverables. And if you deliver to the client something that looks like this, does that really provide the great impression that the client, the developer, or whoever's paying you, maybe you work for the city, does this really give you a great impression of how great your work is? Or do you deliver something like this? And the problem with most software to get to this point, you're adding days, if not weeks, of work to get to this point. Well, what if it only took maybe an hour to get to this point beyond your normal working, the time you're working on a site? And that is what you're going to learn here in this lesson is all this information that you previously learned, the planning techniques using accurate data to get an accurate plan and then take the surface data and the contours. How does all of this come together to easily get to this point? And that way 3D becomes a normal communication and not that ugly little 2D plan that is not impressive at all. So what we want you to do is open beginning step 10, and at this stage you'll see a plan that is all embellished. We finished the driveways, we've got all of the surfaces defined, the colors, and we want to go on and complete the plan and get drive information from it. And this is the real power that we've led up to. Now, the normal geometric process allows you to have a fully rendered drawing. You no longer have to go into, Photoshop or anything to render your drawing. These will take it a bit further. We want you to unzoom the screen with a little minus button. Unzoom just a bit. Change to the title layer 24. And we're going to go into drafting and then press rectangle. When you hit press rectangle, it's going to ask for a height and a width of the rectangle. And normally a 22 height and 33 width would be a 22 foot by 33 foot box, but you're going to check entered inches. It'll multiply by the scale. So if you check that little box, it'll be a 22 by 33 inch, which will be a border of a plan that shows up on the screen. That's the difference between that little check box. Then you'll hit submit, and after that, you'll see a dotted line, a phantom line show up on the screen, and you'll move your mouse just like you did with text. It's the same type of thing. You could rotate it, but we're not going to rotate it. We have the arrows to increase graphically the height or the width, on the prompt that you see. It's showing the height and the width in feet, and you'll move your title block around, maybe about to here. And then you'll hit the left button to set it. Now this is a border around the screen that will be shown when you plot, and it is the first polyline that you created. Now again, remember we said earlier, polylines you can't snap to for geometry. So this will mean that you really can't snap to those lines by mistake and use it for some geometry. Polylines are used in GIS and CAD to compute areas. But as you see, we don't need them in LandMentor. They're limited and they're needless extra data. So they're mostly for graphic purposes. LandMentor can only perform geometry in areas and boundaries defined by lines and curves. So it's a safety net for engineering and surveying and platting needs. To use a polyline for geometry, it can be used, but you have to explode it. Then that's under the Edit Polylines. So we're going to zoom up on this area. So tap Z and then zoom up on this area of the plans. And we could see it looks pretty nice, but we're going to actually give it some depth. So press Surfaces in the menu and then press Shadows. And what we want to do is those houses are defined by house. So it could be any part of the word house. HOU is good enough. And shadows, it says shadows on. You could use this to turn shadows off and then press submit. And once you do, you'll see the home list. So you want to press all of them, click all to shadow, and then press done. And then Alt-C to refresh your screen, and you'll see shadows. Now the houses have some depth on the plan. Now, what's interesting is you can't use this to create a PDF. These shadows do not really appear correctly on a PDF, but they look great on an external plot. So if you were to plot this immediately using LandMentor, then you'll have a lot of depth to the buildings. They'll pop. It's a really cool feature. Now, the shadow is, what if it doesn't show up? What's wrong? Well, it has to be in the fill list. So you'd actually have to have something which HOU or house on the fill list. If it doesn't exist, it can't shadow. Now, you'll see a fill in colors called shadow. It's you'll see it's black, and you'll see a order it's in. Now, anything before it will cast a shadow. So if the items you want, let's say it's not casting a shadow over a driveway or a porch, you want to move that before the list. You can control the shadow settings in the preferences. So when you go to preferences, you'll see shadow angle, size, and the opacity of the shadow itself. So that's where you can control it. So how do colors and textures get shown correctly on the plan? How do they do that? It's the order of the fills. So in other words, imagine your table and then your keyboard. Your keyboard's on top of the table. So the table would be on the fill list before the keyboard. Otherwise, if the keyboard was on the fill list before the table, you wouldn't see the keyboard because it would be under the table. So think of it that way. It's stacking on top. The first fill is your site. It's usually the base fill and a default site, and then everything is layered on top of that. So it's an order of the fill. Now, I want to talk about reporting the surfaces. So we use the surfaces, we created lots, we did a whole bunch of things, and then on this example, we've got a whole lot of information more. And as we brought in the buildings, we brought in the living rooms, the walls, the windows, and all this other surface data. So here's the power in the software on surface reporting. So hit report. Again, everything that you see is textured or color is actually a defined surface. So the main functions that you're going to be using is query click. That's just snapping into an area to find different information. Now this does have a legal description writer, so all you have to do is in the prompt click legal description, click into an area, and you're going to get the legal description. Interestingly, do you know when we wrote that? It was 1978 when we founded Land Innovation Software, 1978. And so a lot of these functions that we have were actually created decades and decades ago. So they're pretty refined. The query name is if you want, say, all the lots or all the pavement, things like that. You would type in lot or pave or, whatever the name is. Paint. Well, what if you wanted to see all the lots that were under 10,000 square foot? Paint allows you to do a whole bunch of things with coloring and highlighting things, and that could be used for your own information or at a city council meeting. Let's say you're a city and a plan was submitted. You would just trust that those areas are correct on the CAD file because it's not a spatial system, and you can't use your ESRI because it's not a precision system. So a plat is submitted to you, a technician or your consultant takes and creates all the spatial data from the CAD file, and then you could say at the meeting, just go, hey, here's all your lots that don't meet our minimums. Bang. They'll show up on the plan live and instantly. So this is a type of thing you can use in design before you submit a plan, or a city as you're judging a plan. So that's what Paint allows you to graphically do. Impervious surfaces, green. Press the button and it will tell you your impervious surface. All these buttons, by the way, do multiple things. Charts. Instead of looking at numbers, let's chart everything. You'll see that. It's much easier to interpret things. LBCS, those are American Planning Association charts and codes. And if you do not understand what LBCS is, just ignore this button. The job cost. This requires in global preferences for you to put a number on things. So, for example, if you're doing landscape architecture, if you're doing, rough costs, if you know what your pavement is per square yard, things like that, you can apply a cost and that will report the cost. Point numbers, elevations, and descriptions are through the point numbers button, but we're not going to go into that. Obtaining individual surface data. Press query click, snap into an area. So you'd want to snap into, you wouldn't snap into the house to get your lot because you're going to get a living area or something like that. Now notice on the display it says area only. It'll put a flag with the area, and again the areas are to a millionth of a square foot internally. It'll show up on the upper right, and let's say if it wanted a legal description, you would click legal description, then click inside of that. Now let's say you couldn't see the lot because it's under the building. Let's say the building is a lot, but you want to get the lot, but you'll snap into the building and you'll say, wait a second, I need the lot, but the building keeps on coming up and getting garage all the time or living room. Well, that's where the right button of the mouse is. If you look on the prompt, it says all surfaces, so it'll show you the area of everything that's underneath there, and then you can choose the one that you want. So the exact surface area is shown at the upper right on the flag, and the perimeter is highlighted. So those are the three things that are going on there. Rounding. Under preferences, you'll see the rounding, and this is, so you control that. If you want to see square foot higher, if you want to see acreage to the nearest acre, let's say you're doing a plan and it's conceptual. You don't want to show acreage to 6 decimal places, maybe 1 or no decimal places. So you can control that, and it's all interactive because every screen refresh is a new calculation. So it's not like you're locked into any kind of numeric thing. If you wanted to show a distance on the plan to the nearest foot, just, set that to 0. That type of thing. It says it's all interactive. So how, again, I can't stress enough that once you have a closed area and you have precision math, the area is incredibly accurate. So now let's do query name. That's different than query click because maybe we want a series of things. So what you'll do is under the prompt, type in lot, and then the default, which would just be submit, and on the upper right display, it's going to say you've got 13 lots. They're all closed. This is important because if it says 13 lots and one is open, you've got a mistake. So you want to see anything that's closed, you want to make sure there's none that are open. In other words, an open is an alignment, like a street center line for road design or road profile, things like that. We do allow alignments. It shows you the total, which probably will be meaningless for lots, but the average. So that's your average lot size. Now, we're going to do this again. You're going to type in lot, but where it says area only, you're going to pull down where it says count only, and then go area only. So when you do area only and then submit, what it'll do is give you a lot listing. Now, let's say you click legal description or something like that. Then it would give you the legal description of every lot. So this will give you the series of lots in order of the lot number. Now it'll give you the total, the average like it did on the display, but it also gives you the smallest and the largest lot. So let's say your minimum lot size is 8,500 square foot. You could see, wait a second, lot 13 is not legal. So you don't have to use paint. You can use that. So impervious surface coverage. Zoom extends to zoom the whole site. And again, you want site as a base site for this to work. Press green, and the default is highlight impervious areas. It will show the site with white highlighted of everything impervious, and you'll see this number at the end. We've got 28.36% of the site is essentially man-made items. But there's a mistake in here. There's a mistake. Look at this list. What should not be on the list? We got apartment buildings, that's okay. Retail shops, that's okay. Wait a second, there's a bedroom. So the bedroom, even though it's only 6,101 square foot total in bedrooms, that should not be on the list. Why is that on the list? Because remember, in the fill list, you're putting in what's impervious or not. So you would go to the fill list and then look at bedroom, which would be under colors, and then change that to anything but impervious, because the bedroom's part of the house, so you're replicating. So don't just look at a list and say, hey, that's great. It's like word processing. Don't just use a spell check and assume everything's perfect. So this is a tool. It's a great tool, but you still can have a mistake in there, because just because it's painted white doesn't mean there's nothing inside the white thing that was painted that isn't replicated. So just look at the list and just to make sure that everything that's impervious is painted white, and then everything that is in the list is not replicating on top of it. So again, you would fix it just by going into the fills. The site's colored green and impervious areas white. That way you could see, like, if the building didn't fill in white, you forgot to do that impervious. So let's open beginning step 11. I'd like you to hit report and then press chart, and then just click submit. Notice environmental density, or that same number that was in the green button that we just saw, that chart of numbers, that is the default. So hit submit and you'll get all your man-made impacts. So we've got 27.4% of the site is man-made impacts. In other words, this is everything that's a hard surface. Everything that's landscaped in green is shown for the rest of the site, the pervious. Isn't this a whole lot easier to look and understand than that previous list of numbers? So what happens is, these textures and fills and colors are related to the site plan, and it's going to be absolutely instant. And those are the right numbers. So it shows you what the numbers are. Now, this is essentially like the window sticker of a car showing your gas mileage. So if there's waste in the plan, and of course, by this time, because of lesson 2, you should be recognizing where that waste is. This is the way you start analyzing and communicating it. So it's important to let the plan communicate with you. If you're going in front of a planning commission or council, you say, hey, look at all the green space we've got on here. Now, of course, there's good green space and bad green space. You have a lot of slivers of green space that are absolutely worthless, and then half your site's unusable, so it's green. So there is some truth that green space is not necessarily quality space, but this communicates a whole lot different pictures than having your clients or the planning commissions or councils work through numbers. You don't want that. The chart had descriptive names for the various items. So where do those names come from? Well, when you double click in the fill list, the name, it will show you a descriptive name, and that could be up to 32 characters. So you might have some acronym for something. You don't want an acronym on the chart, so you have the descriptive name shown instead. So we're going to take and insert that chart we just created onto the site plan. So I want you to press Z and zoom up in approximately this area, or any area, by the way, and then add image. So you'll go to edit, images, select add image, and then it'll automatically default in the directory that you're working in, which will be automatically where that chart goes. It's a PNG, so you'll click on that chart and then you'll press open, and you want it in the foreground. By the way, anything that's in the drawing you'll want in the foreground. And then you'll see the chart will appear. Now, this case, it shows in the upper right corner. Now, when you look at it, look at the border line. Can you see how it's a little bit lighter? And look how the green of the site on the left is a little bit lighter. You've got it in the foreground, so it's going to obliterate anything that's underneath it. So you want to hit the down arrow to decrease the size to get it to the point where it will fit, and you don't have these areas that are muted. You want everything, you don't want the chart to hide anything underneath it. So you'll move it down until it's no longer hiding those, and then you'll set it with the mouse left button. Now here we had it in the lower right corner, but make sure it's not obliterating anything. And now it's embedded in the plan. And this is how you'll take and create title blocks and things like that, or notes on the plan, or details. I use PowerPoint a lot. So I'll do all my title blocks in PowerPoint. I will use the snip tool, create a JPEG, and then I bring that up on the plan. This is an example of a development in North Carolina. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn the topography and hide the contours for speed, fills, and activate all fills, and press done. And then when we take a look at the plan, regenerates much faster because the fills are textured and it would take more time. So there's four different types of homes on here, and there's different types of lots that we're putting alley lots, front-loaded lots, different products. And with everything with the fills on, and I'm just going to hit Shift Q to quickly turn the fills back on, you can see how much detail there is as far as the rooms and everything and the different scenarios. Now I'm going to show you how to use the charts. So again, we'll go into chart. Just some really quick things. Environmental density, I hit submit, and that goes through every item that you see, the square footage, and it gives us the different information of every man-made thing and the impacts and the total acreage. So it really eliminates a lot of the things that you would need in the legend. Now, I'm going to do a count pie. And in my count pie, my fills, I have different types of lots. There's different zonings, so I want to find out how many lots I have of different areas. So what I've done was I have a lot A, B, C, and D when I snap to them, but then I have a more descriptive fill. So I'm going to take those, push them off to the side, and hit selected, and I have 414 lots. And you can see the percentages of the lots, so it's almost like a third of each, and the numbers. And then these colors correspond with the colors of the different lot types. Then what I'm going to do is I want to find out really how much open space. And when I talk about open space, I take and I tend to color in my front yards. And this is the yard space that's visible. That's the space where it's manicured and it's always going to be presentable, including the flood and the park area. For example, if I do query click and I go into a park area, it will show me my acreage of this particular piece of park. If I wanted a legal description of that, I then hit legal and then I go back into the park area, and this is the legal description with all the curve data and everything, and it's going to be exact. What I want to do in this report is I want to compare it to a major area, and the major area is almost always going to be site. Doesn't have to be, but it's the overall major area. I want the flood limits, I want my front yards, and then I want my park and common area. So those are going to be the open spaces, and I hit select, and what it does is it puts in all of these spaces that I just asked for, and then it shows the remaining site, and then those numbers are down here, and here's your total acreage. So without even putting a legend on the plan, I could put the three charts on the plan, and it's far more descriptive.